I don't have an intro. I just realized I don't have.
Well, there's no
start.
We
just
straight into it.
With no anything. Just
we're gonna do we'll have a
it.
little sequence of chateau stuff and. Ta-da.
So there's drone shots, and then here we are.
There we go.
Once upon a time, you said that you would never return to Star Wars unless you needed a bigger house or a second home.
That was a real likable quote, wasn't it?
See, there you go.
Jesus Christ.
It was.
You say stuff.
Yeah.
People ask you things. You say stuff. You don't really think about it that much.
Right. But then you're held to it because it's
because it's there. It's
like a religion. It's like
it's true. I said a slightly dickish thing.
But then you've said you've softened on this. That was what I was going to ask. It sounds like you've kind of I feel like more recently I saw you saying, well, maybe why not?
Yeah, I mean, possibly. I'm open to it. Like I'd be open to it. Although right now I'm not so open to working with Disney. If they kind of figure it out and not succumb to fascism, but
that would be great.
That would be great. But if that happens, then yeah, I'd be open to having a conversation about a galaxy far away.
There we go.
Or any number of other things.
So I saw Frankenstein this week. This is a story that's been told, I think 400 times I saw somewhere in various media in various forms. Is there one that impacted you, a young Oscar Isaac?
I mean, I think when I really got turned on to movies, I remember vividly like De Niro as the monster and being so excited about that. And, so that one actually loomed large in my head just as like a moment of being excited about, wow, how did they tell that story? Unlike Guillermo, who was a devotee of this book since he was a child, for me, it was just a little bit always in the periphery.
What was your monster of choice of the greats? You a Wolfman guy or like a...
I remember I really loved the movie Monster Squad that had all the monsters.
Okay.
Wolfman has nards,
Of course.
Classic line.
It appeared in my head the minute you said that.
I know, as soon as you said Wolfman, I'm like, Wolfman has nards. But I think Bram Stoker's Dracula, for me, was like such a huge one. And I watched it so many times. And Gary Oldman for that, like I just, he became one of my favorite actors from his portrayal of that monster.
So yeah, this was a bucket list project for Guillermo. Like I think, it goes back to before he was even making films, but like he said that he's been wanting to do it and scared to do it for 25 years or something like that. How was it pitched to you? What did he say to you when you talked about it? How did he tell you this story?
We got together. I went to his house just to meet, it was like a general meeting. I happened to be in town, and we sat in his kitchen and ordered, takeout Cuban food, and we're sitting there eating rice and beans and pork, and we just started talking about our fathers. We started talking about our dads, both the pain and the joy and forgiveness and becoming fathers ourselves, and what's inherited as far as pain and trauma. And so we talked just very much about that, and at the end of that conversation, he said, I'm making Frankenstein, and I think you need to play Victor. And I said, what? What's that? What now? You're doing what? He's like, I'm making Frankenstein. It's the thing I've always wanted to make, and I just think that you need to be Victor. And so I, of course, it was an incredible moment, but I was protective of getting too excited. I'm like, maybe he's just having like an aneurysm right now, or who knows? Maybe he just says that to everybody. That's like his pickup line. but I was like, I'm just going to go, and let's assume that, I don't know. It was just, I was dreaming it. He gave me Mary Shelley's Frankenstein when I left, and the Tao Te Ching. And he's like, these are the two books you need to read.
Wow.
And then we kept talking, and then within a year he had the whole beginning and the end, and then descriptions of a lot of the middle. And we got together in New York, and we sat down and I read basically all the parts. And he just watched and listened, and particularly the ending, which is so much about how do you move forward with a broken heart, and how do you forgive? We were both just in tears, and then it started to feel real.
I want to start with why Daoism, and how do you think it's a Taoist Frankenstein?
Well, I think he's kind of a Taoist filmmaker. It was interesting. I was looking at even art that way, and a lot of it is big picture. It's like it is a bit of a God's eye view of the world and of reality. There's a circularity to it. There is, even in all of the darkness, there's this kind of benign awareness underneath it that ultimately there is like a loving universe underneath all of the pain that can be accessed.
Yeah, I mean, even that process sounds atypical. Even like the starting with that conversation before you ever before the word Frankenstein is mentioned.
Yeah.
It sounds like you had the heaviest possible conversation a little bit over Cuban food.
We did, but what's amazing is that Guillermo's such an incredibly joyful person as well, and the set was joyful. You know, we were laughing all the time. He basically directed me in like dirty jokes, you know, and we only spoke in Spanish to each other. So there was like an incredible intimacy that was happening. And I think because there was so much joy and lightness, we were able to kind of go full tilt with the darkness as well. And I think that's what Guillermo does. He's always done that. He kind of shines a light on the ugly to make it not so scary anymore. I think our version, this Victor, maybe unlike others, has a lot of rage in him, and a lot of defiance was a word that we used a lot, you know, and a lot of addicts. Like that's one of the main things that they have is defiance against circumstances, defiance against themselves, against their past, that allows them to spiral into just the void. And so, you know, the fun thing with Victor is that I played him like an addict, you know, even though the only thing you see him ingest is milk, right? You know, in a way to get mom's milk back.
Yeah, that's not Freudian at all.
No, not at all. Not
it signifies
at all.
It's so confusing.
But there's that's an element to him. So he's kind of the personification of like defiance.
Well, he's defying the gods. I mean, this is like the original sort of story about a tech guy playing God in a way. Like,
yeah, a bit. Although, you know, we've shied away from the tech part of it. Like it's an emotional Mexican melodrama that we made. This is like a very European story told in an extremely Latin point of view. You know, at one point I was like, "This is a lot, man. Is this too much?" And he's like, "Look, cabrón, it's not an accident that my Victor's real name is Oscar Isaac Hernandez." You know, he's like, "This is right. You know, this is his story. This is Guillermo's story. You know, refracted through, you know, this 18-year-old English woman."
Yeah, I mean it's the most Catholic Frankenstein way that I've ever seen, because I know he said that was his idea, that the Karloff version was like, oh, this is what a saint would.
Well, he said he called Frankenstein the patron saint of imperfection.
Yeah. In general, do you like to go from, when you're kind of coming up with a performance, kind of getting into the space for it, do you like to go from ideas to something sort of physical and tactile that you're going to do, or do you like to go the other way and kind of find the idea?
I think I try to listen to what the story is, you know, or what the project is. So I don't have like a very strict way that I get into it. I'm also pretty gullible, so like it's easy for me to buy into stuff, you know. Maybe that's because of a religious upbringing, you know, where it was like you have to believe, you know. It's like, and so the fear of not believing is like I've got to believe this. I got to believe this, even if I have doubts. Even, you know, it's like there's no other choice. I'll go to hell otherwise, and that's how I approach scripts. But I had lots of ways in, you know. Like there was obviously the emotional talk that really was the thematic thing that we were going into, but also I love playing with form. And I know one thing that Guillermo said was like, this is not naturalistic. I need speed of speech and speed of thought. And so we watched films from the 30s and 40s where it's just clipping and clipping. There's a long reams of dialogue that have to just move at a clip, even as heightened as the dialogue and the writing is, you know, the poetic nature of it. So I played with doing some of the speeches in iambic pentameter, just for myself as like a nerd.
Sure.
You know, just as a way of like, I'm going to see if I can fit all of these into five beats, every single line, and see what I can do, and then actually play with that. And that was just like a way into finding the pleasure of the language. And I think for me, as painful and as dark of a character and as rageful and defiant of a character as Victor is, he's also probably the most pleasurable character I've ever played. Character is kind of a conceptual thing, you know. I bring an element, but then Kate Hollie shows up and expresses this person through these incredible costumes that suddenly I'm like, I see who Victor is, you know. He's an artist. He would have maybe been a musician, and, you know, he would have been on the forefront. He's a punk. You know, all that comes together to create this person.
the first time we see him, or not, I don't know if it's the very first time, he's in the arena, he's on stage, he's like strutting around, kind of being like, look at my works, all of that. There's that quality to him, like that.
Well, that was one of Guillermo's directions was like, he's a rock star. That's him in the studio. He's looking where he wants the speakers. He's looking where he wants the pyrotechnics. That's how he struts around in the thing. And again, we're going into, this is an unreliable narrator that's telling the story.
Right.
This is not necessarily how it was, but this is how it felt to be there and to present his work to these people. It felt like him expressing himself. It wasn't so much of talking about his scientific achievements. It was like an emotional expression.
Yeah. But he does have, it is that rock and roll. It's the gloves, I think, are really where those red leather gloves is where it gets really glammed out.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is Prince.
No, I watched, there's like a great behind the scenes of Prince. I think it was the performance for the Special Olympics in 95, 96 or something. And watching the way he walks up on stage and is quite quiet, but moves around in his little black high-heeled shoes. And I definitely took a lot of inspiration from that.
How to own a space like that.
Yeah, how to move kind of effortlessly through a space and own it and create.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about music just because, before you had the job you have now, you played in rock bands, like for real. You were on stage, you were, I don't know if you were touring, but you were playing out. Did you have moves back in those days? Did you have stage moves?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was a ska band, so there's like some set.
I guess, yeah.
Some set stuff you gotta do, some skanking.
Pick it up.
Like, pick it up, Yep, I think there are quite a few videos of me online skanking around.
But you don't have to come up with the advantage of ska is that it's a sort
of a pre-existing architecture, exactly.
Yeah, it's like it's a dance. It's formatted. You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've carried that with you in some way?
My skanking?
You're skanking, yeah. Are you skanking internally when you're doing this job? When you're acting, when you're performing?
Always. Yeah, once a rude boy, always a rude boy.
I want to go back to that initial conversation where Guillermo was talking you through all of these things. I think it's interesting that the first thing that you said was you were talking about your fathers. The saddest moment is when Victor, who's for me anyway, I don't know, this might reveal too much, but when Victor, who has sort of like defied his father and is like, I'm going to be better than my father, I'm going to do what you could never do, I'm going to outdo you and everything. And implicit in that is like, I'm not going to be the way that you were. And then he beats the creature just as he has been beaten in his life. That has nothing to do with it being a Frankenstein story. It's the sadness of
the blindness of what gets inherited, and not, by raging against it, by that response kind of blinds him to him doing exactly the same things again. And, I think I certainly can relate to that feeling of, running away from something so much that you run right into the arms of it. Without realizing it.
That's fascinating to think about, like how we unerringly kind of seek that out, those opportunities to either redo or
to refix it or to just redo it because it's what feels, some part of the body feels it needs to experience it again to kind of have some agency over it. What Victor just didn't expect was it's this idea that the creature is an extension of himself. So if he can rage at himself and he can hate himself, it's no problem hating this creature because it's just a reflection of him. His fear of being rejected because of the creature or his hopes for being accepted because of the creature just objectifies it. It's just a thing that he is in relation to. And that's something that I think as a parent can happen often. It's like people helicopter their kids because they're just so afraid that they'll look bad. Like, you don't embarrass me, Like don't if you do that, even like with the good intentions. Like I don't want you to be a spoiled brat. I don't want you to talk to people that way. I don't want you because they'll think I'm a bad parent, And then also on the other side is the pride part of it. It's like that's mine. That's my kid. That's mine. It's mine. This possession.
Mm-hmm. In the end, he may not deserve it. There may be some people who would like to see Victor get, his skull crushed by the creature as he shows up.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, what happens is this moment of forgiveness. It's this, and it came out of nowhere for me and kind of took me by surprise like, when it happens.
You know, I think that maybe that's also the kind of Catholic part of it, is like grace isn't only for those that deserve it, you know, because who really deserves it, right? So it's like, and how much bigger the gesture of forgiveness to those that don't necessarily deserve it, right? I mean, it's supposed to be available, you know, you want to be available to do that. It was about him, the creature, you know, for the creature it wasn't, does he deserve it, does he not deserve it? It's like, in order, that it's just was his nature.
Right, in order to survive and be human, like we need to forgive. But also it takes so much like fortitude to do that, like, and to be able to do it.
Or it also takes like a lot of surrender. There's a great line of T-Bone Burnett song where it says, everybody wants peace, but nobody wants to surrender. And so it's like, that's when that moment where he just surrenders the war to him. Yeah. And, you know, I think Victor also finally calls him my son, you know, and realizes that he's his own entity, his own thing. He's not just an extension of him, and shows remorse for the first time, you know, and kind of also forgives himself, you know. He says, forgive yourself into existence.
Right, and that's when he becomes real. Are we spoiling Frankenstein a little bit? Maybe. Maybe.
We'll see.
Too late now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the hardest thing, right? Forgiveness, it's the hardest thing to do. I don't know. Are you good at it?
I mean, I think I try to give the benefit of the doubt often, you know? I try to, you know, there's like a sense of trying to speak just what's true and what doesn't divide people so much. You know, like there is an element of, I think that's like a Joseph Goldstein, like a Buddhist monk thing where he talks about that. Yeah, I think I've definitely, you know, attempted to be more forgiving and to let go of resentments the older I am.
That's the work. Increasingly, I find that's the work. I'm no good at it. That's why I asked the question. I've got holding on to a lot of them. There's like 3 or 4 people. I'm like, no, I have to forgive you. Damn it.
I'm good at asking for forgiveness.
Sure, that's good too. Well, right. That's important too, I guess.
Yeah.
Like maybe that, right. Okay, that's it. The one film of yours that's coming out that I haven't seen that's playing festivals is King Hamlet, which is the story of your life in around 2017, basically, right? It's a little about less than a decade ago.
Yeah.
But enough time ago that I imagine it's, you know, feels somewhat remote. Have you had the opportunity to revisit that movie as it's been coming out? And if so, what's that been like? What was it like to visit that time again?
Yeah, well, King Hamlet is this doc that Elvira Lind, who's an incredible documentary filmmaker, and also I happen to be married to, she filmed in 2017 while I was doing Hamlet, and a lot of really wild things happened in life. And so her way of digesting it and processing it was just to pick up a camera, and years later she's put it together, and it's fascinating. It does actually feels a little bit like a doc about a band making an album. You know, it's very much about this time and a place, and these people coming together to do Hamlet, this very epic version. It's a 4-hour version with 2 intermissions, and very much about grief. And so yeah, it has been incredible to revisit that. Also scary to open up a window into how it's done, which I think often people don't see, is how does one use the thing as an artist, use the things that happen in your life, and how do those things affect the work, and how does the work become entwined with life, and with death and marriage and birth, and you know, that kind of synthesis that happens, you know, inevitably, or you know, it's hard to know which comes first. Is it like, do we use that because we're artists, or does using that make us artists, you know?
Were there moments where you're like, oh man, this guy knows nothing. This guy has no idea what he's in for, like looking ahead?
I do. I look at him, I do. It's like I feel compassion. I feel compassion for this person that's in the middle of the storm, you know, on like a little tempest-tossed bark, and yet compassion for someone that's trying to make sense of it by doing this work and doing it in public, and trying to connect with other people.
You got to forgive your younger self.
Yeah.
Some naivete, maybe.
Yeah, I mean that's in a way going back to like who deserves forgiveness. Like that is the hardest thing, is like self-forgiveness. You know, that's I think the most challenging thing. You know, it's like, how do you make a friend of your mind?
Yeah. You let me know if you figure that out. Once you've solved that,
Lots
just
of
get back to me.
psychedelics.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. Exactly. That makes it a stranger of your mind,
yeah,
as well. Yeah.
Friendly stranger.
Right.